Hey guys, welcome into the Next Man Up podcast. I am Mark, he is John, and we're both honored to be with you for another episode and always inviting you to connect with us, whether it's our website, thenextmanup.com, Facebook page at NMU Journey, or hitting us up via email, feedback@thenextmanup.com. However you prefer, we look forward to you engaging with us. John, good to see you again, man. What's happening?
Good to see you, Mr. Stanifer. All is well in my world.
I love the background that you got. I think.
Oh, please describe it to the audience. Please.
So is it called Busch Stadium? Is that what it is in St.
Yes,
Louis
sir.
where your Cardinals
Yes, sir.
play? So
Yes.
the bright green pops with the red seating, but I think it looks like they actually have an arch designed into the outfield grass with the arch complementing it in the skyline in the background. Like that's super cool. Baseball fields always intrigue me, how they mow them, how they cut them. And anyway, it's just I'm not surprised you have a Cardinals background, but it's one that I haven't seen before, and I'm noticing the arch, and it's pretty cool.
It is very cool. Okay, see, look what we started. St. Louis does well with their promotional materials. I'll just leave it at that. They do really well as a fan, but what they put out on all their social media platforms, they put nice stuff out. No
Okay.
doubt.
Is that where you swiped this? Was from
Oh yeah, I didn't take it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't figure it was yours.
No. If you look on my Facebook page right now, my cover photo is a Instagram photo from whatever Cardinal account of the day of Yachty and Wainwright setting the record.
Okay. All right.
And it's a very nice shot. It's like behind home plate, looking, out toward, not unlike the photo you're looking at, but field level.
Yeah.
Behind Yachty and Wainwright's pitching to him. It's a very nice shot.
Well, and to give your boys some more love, because we know that you're a big Cards fan, at time of recording, I'm blanking on the guy's name. Come on, your slugger. Come on.
Pujols.
Yeah, Albert Pujols.
Yeah.
So we're recording this late September. It's not going to air for multiple weeks yet, but he just moved into fourth place all time alone in home runs with 696, I think, or maybe 697.
Well, that number took him to the record. He currently sits at 698. So
Okay.
he's 2 from 700.
Okay. So a couple of big things. I know you're not a Yankees fan, but Aaron Judge just reached 60, I think, and Pujols just set a personal best and standing alone in fourth place. So for all the baseball listeners, we're getting them all jazzed up. For everybody else, they're like,
up here.
"Move on, Mark.
Right.
Move on. We don't care about baseball. We're not listening to this episode for baseball." So I'll take my own advice here and move on. Here's my question for you. When you hear the word gentleman, what do you think? What comes to mind?
Well, the first thing that's always, may sound odd to listeners, but the first thing that's always come to mind has to do with dress. I don't know why. Like how a man dresses seems to somehow lead people to refer to them as a gentleman. But usually, I think, I could be wrong here, but I think usually people attribute that to behavior, right?
Yeah.
That however that man observes etiquette or treats people, people would tend to call them a gentleman.
It's a word.
Behavior driven more so than dress.
More than appearance, yeah.
But, back in the day, I think dress did have something to do with it.
I think they're very closely related. It's a word that I'm familiar with, you're familiar with, we're familiar with it, but I don't know that it means the same today or that we're as much interested or focused on it. as it did a long time ago. But like you, I also think of someone who's sharply dressed,
Mm-hmm.
and also someone who carries himself well. Now, who knows what's on the inside, but on the outside, that outward expression of behavior and appearance, there's a certain level of sophistication or
Yeah.
class
Yeah.
or gentlemanliness. I know you can't define the word with the word, but like there's a certain level of gentlemanliness that I picture when I hear the word.
For some reason, Jeff Foxworthy just came to my mind, and please let me explain that, because back in his heyday, his what do you call it, standard riff, whatever. Uh, how do you find a redneck? That's not what was the question? How do you know if you're a redneck?
Okay.
You know the joke?
I don't.
Oh, that was it. Oh, Google it, people. You'll find plenty of videos of him doing that shtick in his stand-up comic. So it's funny because my mind just went to how men sit and the language they use and all that kind of stuff. And most people would not call Jeff Foxworthy a gentleman, but I mean, based on his comedy and stuff.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, in person, when he's not on stage doing that, people would define him as a gentleman.
Why?
It's just a, pardon me?
Why do you make such a strong statement that the public performance persona doesn't line up with the real persona?
No, because he's making fun of people and he's calling out rednecks. It's just but that's his comedy. That's what he's made a living on.
Yeah.
That's why he's known. He doesn't do that in public. I mean, excuse me, in private. I wouldn't think. And having heard him interviewed and so forth, it's just an interesting parallels, not the right comparison of what you just said about how a person looks. Just because they may dress sharply doesn't necessarily mean yay or nay.
Yeah.
Appearances and persona.
So I don't know if you're familiar with this media resource, the Epoch Times. Maybe some of our listeners are, but they released something not too long ago that caught my attention, and they described it as a code of manners for refined society. It was written by John Young, AM. I'm not sure what the AM stands for. John H. Young, and it was published in 1881. And often they'll put out old things like that in today's environment, and it catches my attention. But essentially, it's a guide, like a manual for how to be a gentleman from 120 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so it caught my attention. It got me thinking. I actually went to the dictionary, which I often do, not a surprise, but like, what does this word actually mean? So the dictionary definition of the word gentleman is a chivalrous, courteous, or honorable man. And then a sub-definition of that is a man of good social position, especially one of wealth and leisure. And then there's another sub-definition that says, in the UK, a man of noble birth attached to a royal household. And so I think your perception or your association of gentlemen having a certain appearance, I think my words were they're crisply dressed. Some of that is rooted in the actual definition of the word, and some of it also is rooted in the social status from where this word comes, or particularly in some of these ideas, these guidelines in this manual about what it means to be a gentleman. There's definitely a social status element to it, such that if you are in this social class, social status, this is the expectations for behavior. But I found it really interesting just reading through. It's long. It's really long. And don't worry, listeners, we're not going to take you through it. We will link to it in case you're interested. We'll give you the very short version as a prompting for our conversation here. But I found myself looking at this exhaustive list for young people, both young men and young women, and thinking, okay, what is culturally specific and appropriate then versus now, and what are some of the principles that are still in play today, regardless of how different our culture is, 140 years later, because we have become so much more casual in our culture today with dress, with expectations, with language, with relationships. Like a lot of this stuff just seems like the dark ages as you read through it, just because of the culture through which we're interpreting it today, not the culture in which it was written. So that's kind of the prompting for this idea of what does it mean to be a gentleman, and what can we learn from a manual written 140 years ago.
Yeah, I have several thoughts here that may or may not have credence, but it's interesting to acknowledge that this came from a particular country, a particular culture, and an expectation. So the guys went through this. Excuse me, the gentlemen went through this, and the ladies went through their parallel kind of training, manual walkthrough, whatever. 100, well, and then America shows up, and we're a mix
Yeah.
of a whole bunch of cultures who didn't have that, or they had their own version of it, and it continues to evolve. I think not only what you just said about casualness and so forth, but the world is just so different.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting conversation. Even as we're talking, it's becoming more interesting to me, because how does a dad go about talking to their son about whether he calls it being a gentleman or whatever the wording is he uses? That's a relevant conversation that it's possible. Well, let's be real. I never had that conversation with my dad.
Yeah.
So it's possible a bunch of listeners like, yeah, this is interesting. I've never had this conversation. My dad didn't have it with me. So it's interesting to think about how to have this conversation with my own son.
In your story, you may have gotten shortchanged just simply because you were coming into that age of awareness at the time that your dad passed. And so you lost a potential opportunity. Who knows how he would have approached it. I know it's interesting. I didn't think about this until just now. One of the investments my parents made way back when I was young was a big book, like twice the size of a typical book in dimensions. And I think it was called the Book of Character Sketches. And essentially it was stories, some biblical, maybe it was all biblical, I don't remember for sure, but they really were drawn to the stories and the character development in a person that came through these stories within the book. And it was an investment for them at the time. It was an investment that they felt important. It was important to make. Rather than buying encyclopedias, they bought a book on character development. And so it was part of my upbringing. It was woven into the spiritual training as well, and how do you treat a woman and how do you treat others. And so it was there for sure, but it wasn't necessarily like we're going through a manual and these are the things that you're going to get. It was sort of incremental, additional training to all the schooling and all the spiritual training that I was getting. There was an emphasis on character formation. And when before we started recording, I told you, like, we don't, as a society, as a culture, not individual families, and probably largely not our audience, but as a culture and society, we're not as focused on character formation anymore or character training. We're focused on math scores, ACT scores, your batting average, or the latest technology that you can acquire. We're less focused as a society on character formation. So on one hand, this stuff is like really archaic and screams of it's just old fashioned and it's irrelevant. On the other hand, there's wisdom here that we can pay attention to because truth existed long before you and I were born, and truth will exist well into the future. It's just incumbent upon us to rediscover that truth for ourselves, and then, as you were saying, to pass that on to our kids. And what is character formation? What does gentleman formation look like as we're engaging our sons in their journey?
Yeah, you're right. As far as what we do focus on, it's more about success. Define success. Is that the grades? Is that the trophies? Is that a certain financial status that you're hoping your son knows how to reach? And I would guess, if we're honest with ourselves as a society, we would agree this is a missing element. And if we figured out how to address it in the 21st century better, we would have a better rounded. Is that the right way to say that?
More well-rounded.
There we go. Younger generation who would know how to pass this on to their kids.
So I'm going to share just a couple of these that stood out to me, and I'm going to have a little fun with this first one. So it is Gracefulness of Carriage. A gentleman should not only know how to fence, to box, to ride, to shoot, and to swim, but he should also know how to carry himself gracefully and how to dance if he would enjoy life to the utmost.
Very nice.
Very nice. So okay, we don't fence, we don't box, we don't shoot and swim in the same way that they did. But what I hear in that is let's give our sons a well-rounded view of physical activity, to be active, to learn, and to participate in a number of things. And the reference to dance also caught my attention, maybe an appreciation for the arts as well. Not just the athletic pursuits, but the artistic and creative pursuits as well.
Well, it's unfortunate we weren't able to get a Brit to be a guest here, because I'm sure they could give us a little more of the history here that we don't have. My guess is because of the culture and class expectation. When you went to an event, you needed to know how to do these things.
That's right.
Else you didn't fit in, right? I would imagine.
Right.
I'm only going by what I've seen in movies. So, when you mentioned the dance thing, I'm thinking of like a scene, let's say from Little Women or Pride and Prejudice, that type of movie that's set in particular, well, back in this day. Yeah. If you and I, if we showed up at those events, we would not be considered gentlemen.
No, we would be lost.
We wouldn't know how to do squat.
Right, exactly. So because the culture put an emphasis on balls and dancing and interacting like that, it was important for parents to raise up their boys to know what's expected of a man on the dance floor in that setting, which, like that versus a dance club today, it's it's not even fair to say dance in the same word, because in the comparison, because they're just so different.
So it makes me, just to go down a practical thought here for a moment, how do dads determine what are those social settings that they want to teach their son what is expected. Just think through that. What are those social settings? And it's going to be different based on, your life and so forth. And how do you teach that so that they aren't embarrassed and they do show up the way a gentleman should show up?
I remember one of my early interactions with multiple forks and multiple knives on the table, the spoon across the top, and feeling like I don't know what to do here, because I've only ever eaten with one fork, and occasionally I use a knife. Sometimes it's my fingers, but I knew enough in that setting that, okay, fingers were not appropriate utensils, but which one is which? And some of it, I think, John, is recognizing that at different economic classes, there's different expectations. And chances are this manual was written to a more wealthy economic class versus a common economic class. So if you are raised in a very wealthy home where more formal dinners with lots of utensils and silverware on the table, it's natural that you're going to pick that up. But if you're not raised that way or in that environment, then it's new for you. It will be new for your son to go into that environment. So to your point, how do you help him figure out which fork to start with? And it may be, Mom, which fork? I don't know.
If you don't know, ask, right?
Right.
Yes.
Again, back to, it's okay if you don't know, but recognize that there may be an opportunity where you got to go to school as a dad in order to be able to school your son. The other thing that comes to mind is, as you say that, John, is this thinking that we do the best we can with the tools that we have in the time in which we live. So let me give you an example. So in a category of miscellaneous rules toward the middle part of this document, there is this suggestion: never lean your head against the wall as you may disgust your wife or hostess. And you're thinking, well, why? Because it could soil the paper of her room. It could soil the wallpaper. And so culturally, okay, put yourself in that context. They probably had plenty of oils and product in their hair when they were clean and presentable. We don't have that today. Or we don't have wallpaper as much as we have paint, and the paint protects against stains and things like that. So what's the equivalent today? I remember being in college. Here's a great example. I remember being in college, and we were visiting somebody that we didn't know. It was me and another guy or two, kind of like a follow-up visit from the church that we were attending to someone who had come and had expressed interest in having a follow-up conversation. So I don't know why they thought it was a good idea to send a bunch of college kids to do this. Nonetheless,
Right.
we did.
Right.
We were sitting in a small living room, and I sat down on the sofa and immediately put my feet up on the coffee table in front of us. I was not aware of what I was doing intentionally. I was not aware of the host's reaction. But after we were done, one of the guys who was much more socially aware was like, dude, did you see what happened when you put when you put your feet on her table? I'm like, no, I put my feet on her table. Like I was not even aware of what I was doing, but it was very offensive to her.
Yeah.
And I was not intending offense, but I was not aware of my physical behavior, my nonverbal communication, and what that was doing to the host in that situation. I was not acting very gentlemanly. It's the equivalent of leaning my greasy, oily head on her paper, paper walled 140 years ago. Hey, gentlemen, just a quick pause to let you know about an upcoming opportunity I'm really excited about. I'm looking for 6 to 8 guys who want to really grow as fathers, to level up their fathering game. Now, this isn't going to be a Bible study or a dive into the latest parenting philosophy fad. This is about becoming better fathers by becoming better men. Now, I realize this is not for everyone, but it is for you if you want to transform, if you want to get to something real and really accelerate your growth as a father. It's for you if you want to show up at your best for your kids. This group will kick off in January, and there's a lot more information to come, but all I'm asking right now is that you let me know that you're interested. If this sounds like something you're interested in or what you need right now to be the father that you want to be, then head on out to the website, thenextmanup.com/dad group. You can find that link in the show notes as well, thenextmanup.com/dad group, and just sign up. Just tell me you're interested, and there'll be more information to come. Okay, back to the conversation.
Man, there's so many thoughts coming to me. One of them is, let me give a possible 21st century replacement for that line. Don't lean your head against the paper. Something, and I'm immediately thinking about phones. If this were to be written in the 21st century, what would the line say that a gentleman does with his phone in, fill in the blank, in a dinner setting, on a date, when they're having dinner at their house with their family, all of that. I think that seems to be a nice replacement. It's not the word I want, but
it's an equivalent in today's culture.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So, okay, we don't lean our head against the wallpaper. Okay, that worked in 1800s. This is I think it's a legitimate topic that probably some of us adults need to get a hold of and then help our sons with. You agree with that?
I totally agree. I think that's a great example. And it highlights that there's principles behind these rules. If you just take it for the rule itself, which I have a pattern in my prior life of doing that. When you just take it for the rule itself, you miss the bigger picture of how you are showing up, how you are present or not present with somebody else, what you are communicating, even when you're not talking to that other person. And I think there's so much principle here founded in truth that when we can peel back the cultural expression and get to what that looks like today, like put your phone down or put your phone in your pocket or leave your phone in the car. Don't even have it with you.
That's right.
Right? When we can make it applicable to our culture and the things that we're comfortable with, and really the only things that we know today, then it becomes relevant. It's not just this archaic rules to follow to be a wealthy and aristocratic and sophisticated gentleman. It's no. It's how I want to show up with and for myself and the people with whom I have interaction.
Yeah. So I'll give a quick illustration of this. I was invited to a birthday party maybe 2 Saturdays ago. And if you know me, that is not my ideal setting. Let me go to a birthday party with X number of, unexpected number of people, and I might know 5. That's like, oh, this sounds fun. But it was on Saturday at 12:30, which is okay. It is what it is. Well, about 2 days before, I found out that the Roll Tide, who I root for, was going to be playing at that time.
Yep.
So I had a choice to make. Well, I'm going to the party. Just to clear that up, that wasn't the choice. I'd committed to go to the party. So a gentleman would show up to his commitment. Let's just say that.
By the way, that's in the that's somewhere in the document too, is keeping your commitment. So
okay.
Well done, at least keeping your commitment as a gentleman.
Right. So I know that if my phone is in my pocket in the house where the party's happening, I'm going to want to look at the score, right? I mean, I'm not
Of
much of a
course.
fan if I don't.
Of course.
So I consciously said, I'm not taking my phone in the house. And everybody's like, do you know what the score is? No, I don't. I left my phone in the car.
I remember texting you that
You
day
did.
because I was
Yes.
watching the game
Yeah.
and Alabama was not performing.
It was the Texas game.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. So not to pat myself on the back, I'm just giving a real life illustration of what we're talking about. You know, if you've committed to something, maybe a gentleman's statement here is be present. When you show up to it, because I'm heavily guilty of not always being present. Well, if that's an awareness for you, then do something, take these, they're easy steps. They may sound ridiculous, but they're easy steps to put in place that says, okay, if in order for me to show up and be respectful and not come across as a jerk, here's what I need to do.
Yeah.
And remove the temptation. Another way to look at that, remove the temptation and honor the people that you said you would be with.
It's having a vision of who you want to be and knowing why that's important to you, and then structuring your decisions, your boundaries, your environment to really support that. If I know that I'm going to have a hard time not following the game on my phone, then I'm choosing to leave the phone behind. It's a simple thing. It can be a hard choice, but I think it gets to that, what we're talking about here, that character formation of intentionality, of being disciplined, of being responsible, considering others more than you consider yourself. These principles around character formation beyond just the rules. I won't repeat myself, but it's living intentionally in a way that's consistent with who you want to be, right. and then modeling that for others. You mentioned phone. That's like we could do a whole episode on phones. But I'm just thinking about times that I've been out in a restaurant setting or in a public setting, and I see families with kids, or I see other kids, and then I notice what's happening with us, and there's a different sense of presence with my family, because the phones are put away. Unless we're like, oh, I wanted to show you something, or I want to look up something and share it with you, right? But we're together and we're interacting relationally, not just we're physically together, but we're not relationally together. You know what I'm talking about? You've seen it. It's just it's so, again, back to we've. I guess this is maybe an opinion, but a judgment statement. We've become too casual, and there's opportunity here for us to be more intentional and more disciplined as we live it, model it, and as we encourage that formation and development in our boys.
So I want to acknowledge that, and we've already given illustrations of it, but we're going to mess up, even as adults, and our sons are going to mess up. That's going to happen. I think it's worth saying here to the dads to figure out how to help your son know how to respond when they mess up.
Yeah.
It's not that they need to shame themselves and, oh, I wish I had known that. And put some kind of label on their upbringing or whatever, that would put them in a place that they don't need to be in. They don't need to accept that thought is really who they are. You follow me?
I do. Yeah.
So I think if dads just sit in that, and maybe even think through, man, I wish I had somebody who responded, when that had happened to me when I was 12 or, whatever, what would have been helpful to me. and then be ready to do that, because again, it's going to happen. Your kid's going to put their feet up on the person's table,
Yeah.
whatever. It's going to happen. So be ready to coach them about their emotions when that happened, but also maybe if they have to go back and apologize, or whatever they need to do to help them grow in that normal reaction to that incident.
Yeah, I think that's good. So the obvious thing is make it right, apologize, own
Mm-hmm.
it. The more subtle thing there is don't be too hard on yourself. Acknowledge that it was a mistake, or acknowledge what needs to be acknowledged, accept it,
Yep.
but don't give in to that trap of shame or of that self condemnation, because that's not healthy and becoming of a healthy and godly man, or of a gentleman either.
Mm-hmm. Right. You can't help what you didn't know,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yep.
Grow from it. Let it go.
Yep.
I'm thinking about a particular incident, and this is my final thought. We'll see where else we go. But a lot of what I've learned, like you acknowledged, in the absence of a dad in my, uh, really formulating years about this kind of stuff, a lot of what I've learned has been by observation, and particularly when I've been traveling. So I remember very clearly, I was my first international trip was to the country of Belarus. Who goes to Belarus on their first trip out of the United States? Well,
John
John did.
Gregory did.
And I knew what people had told me, but there was a lot. I mean, how would I possibly know all the nuances in a country like that? And one of the clear uh, culturally things you need to know and know how to respond to was, and this is a Christian thing, but that you have to work through as well. But uh, you were considered rude if you did not accept an offer of alcohol in the home when you visited the home. Well, that was a thing for me because I don't drink. I never have. And maybe, I don't know that we need to do an episode about that, but I had to figure out, what does this mean? I don't intend to be rude. Do I don't I, what do I do in this situation? And I learned a lot from that, and I think that's another, I'll just throw that out there, it's another opportunity for dads to consider two things. One, tell your stories to your sons.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledge, I didn't know, but this is how it happened, here's how it played out, here's what I learned from it. Tell your story. And another thought here is maybe even try to intentionally put them in positions with them that they don't know, and use that as a teachable moment, but have intentionality behind it.
Yeah.
So that you're there truly mentoring them through that. And man, that could be really powerful in a number of ways.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's interesting looking back on my parenting from this stage and think, I wish I would have done that, or I wish I had
Mm-hmm.
this in my toolbox, or what would it have been like to do exactly what you were talking about. A lot of it comes down to just being aware of blind spots, tendencies, aware of your own cultural expectations that you're bringing into a new setting, your social expectations that you're bringing into a new setting, and having the awareness coupled with humility to walk into that, willing to learn and be flexible, and like you said, make mistakes and find your way through those new situations. But putting your son in an intentionally different setting to stimulate that awareness and stimulate discussion, I think is a great idea. One of the other things is, what would it look like to sit down and read some of these some of these items from 140 years ago with your son of
Right.
8 or 10 or 12 or
Right.
14 and laugh at them.
Yeah.
But then make the transition to, okay, what's the equivalent today? What's the principle that they're getting at here that might be relevant in application for us today? How can we do it in a 21st century way, but still get to the same heart, the same outcome of this character formation, character training? I didn't do that. I didn't have this resource. I didn't have this awareness 10, 15 years ago when I was in those spots. But listeners, maybe you do, and maybe this has prompted some opportunity for you. Maybe it's prompting some thoughts for you as the dad. So I would just ask a couple of these questions, a couple questions as we wrap this up. What is the goal of how you are living? What is it that you're going after as an ideal, as character, how you want to show up for those around you in your life? And then how are you passing it on to your son? What are you passing on to your son? If you're not even aware of the bigger goal, start there. So then you can be intentional about passing it on to your son in your creative way. Maybe using some of the ideas that we've kicked around here. Maybe some additional ideas have popped up for you through this discussion. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter so much the what as the energy, the inspiration to go do different. As we say toward the end of these almost every time, may this not just be information, but may it be for your transformation as well. So maybe it's something from 140 years ago, maybe it's something from 140 days ago, whatever it is. How are you living intentionally into this space of being a gentleman, and how are you raising your son to get there as well? Those are the questions that I would leave you with today. John, any last thoughts from you before we put a bow on this?
I really like the word you just used, of transformation. And I think the more we can embrace that about ourselves, it gives that spirit to our sons that we're always in transformation mode. And that in itself could be helpful.
Right on.
That was a good word.
Yeah, right on. Well said. Well, guys, thanks for being with us, being part of this community that is about being and raising healthy and godly men. If you got some feedback for us, again, feedback@thenextmanup.com is where you can hit us. And we will be back with another episode, same bat time, same bat channel next week. Until then, adios. To send us your comments or questions, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. The theme music is by Jacob Stanifer at Jacob Stanifer Music, and this show is part of the NRT Podcast Network.